Like tired of standing the whole day, but thank you so much for being here. What you being here really tells me a few things: that you believe in a Startup Grind's mission, you believe in what Startup Grind is doing for their community members by connecting you all together. And you talked about you had decades of experience. I think I was still in school back then, so you have a lot more experience. No, I mean, all that to say is like, the whole adage is like, you always take what your mentor, you should have many mentors in your life, but always take what they're doing for a grain of salt. And so similarly, this is just one opinion, and I'm going to share to you why startups should be building communities instead of teams. So really, the conversation is going to start off with some startup history. Framing this conversation, we're going to pull up some data and then talk about how we start, how we grow, some assessments and some metrics that we can look at, and additional resources. So we look back in 2009 after being acquired for $1.2 billion. Tony Hsieh stated in his book, Delivering Happiness, our goal is for employees to think of their work not as a job or career, but as a calling. Does anyone know what startup that was? Zappos. Thank you. So yes, it was Zappos. So for them, customer service was the mission, right? They didn't have a script for their customer loyalty team, but they had this mission: make the customer happy no matter what. So what they did for their new hires was, besides giving them 4 weeks of extensive training on customer relationships, on a culture of company, after the first week, they asked every single new hire, would you take $2,000 to quit right now? What Tony Hsieh did for his culture and his team was he made sure that every single employee was committed to the company's core mission. Everyone there had the autonomy and power to execute on whatever was needed. And for them, transforming, like if we talk about what community is, it's transforming people's sense of isolation and self-interest into an experience of connectedness and caring for the whole. In another example, after 4 years after founding and managing a personal live streaming site, 2 founders realized that majority of the customers that were streaming on their site was focused on gaming, especially on esports. So in 2011, they spun off their live streaming platform and focused on gaming. And they were also acquired for $1 billion. Does anyone know what company that was? Oh. Really? Is it up there? Okay. So for them, formerly called Justin TV, they realized that their success, after looking at what was working in their community, really depended on supporting the creators that was already willing to create for free by recognizing them, by providing tools, by asking for their opinions on how we can empower them and support them to do more. And so after 1 year after being acquired, or after pivoting specifically to esports and gaming, they started receiving over 3 million unique visitors each month. So for us, is the conversation is how do we carve our own startups, an echelon of history like the rest of these unicorns? How do we create this culture that can inspire our customers and our employees to do their best work? And why is it that community is the answer? Because at the end of the day, we're not a nonprofit. Or am I doing this backwards? Oh. So I want to start the frame by talking about the difference between team-led growth and community-led growth. So one strategy is focused on a product and the other is focused on people. There's no wrong answer. It really depends on your priorities as a company and where you are. But this is really more so looking at team-led growth and community-led growth as a spectrum. One's focused more on short-term gains, one focused on long-term, one is focused on financial capital, how can we generate the most money? The other is focused on social capital, how can I bridge more relationships between people? Because at the end, community is all about friendships. And so when we talked about social capital, let's define that. A community's ability to build upon the quality of relationships and the cohesion that exists among the citizens. What's really more interesting, or what makes this a really interesting conversation, is that you can see how there are communities that has teams within them. We can see this in church, we can see this in nonprofit groups. You can see how we have this large community, but we have the partnerships team, we have this field team, we have the worship team, we have the sales team. And then you can also look at how there are some certain teams that have communities within them. In real life, these are called cliques. You look at a team and you notice that there are a certain group of people with similar features or interests, and they rarely let people in. That's essentially what a community is. A community is people who share the same values, same interests, and they rarely let the people in because they're creating a safe place for them to have those type of conversations. And so why should I care, right? I'm not a nonprofit, I'm not a religious organization. I'm trying to create a startup with the hopes of being acquired, sold, or a lifetime business where it can support what I'm passionate about. Why should I bother looking at community? If we look at CB Insights at the top 20 reasons why startups fail, and they did postmortem for over 101 startups that failed, you can notice that 5 of the top 10 reasons are actually related to customers. The first biggest one, over 47%, is no market need. My customers simply don't want it, right? And if we look at if we look at 7 out of 20, those are related to people and culture of the company. They're not the right team. I'm not passionate. They're not focused. I'm not utilizing their network or their advisors or the mentors that they have available. And only 2 of the top 20 is actually related to cash. But none of this is a surprise for us. It shouldn't be a surprise for us. Generally, startups and business is all about, hey, how can I bring the right people with me to solve problems that people have, right? And how do I scale this and impact people? And if we look at what investors want to know after your pitch, can you guess, what are the 2 biggest questions that investors want to know at the end of your presentation? What's your team like? Are you confident enough to do this? Do you have the advisors? Do you have the network to make this happen? Do you have the partnerships to make it happen? What's your experience and why are you doing this? What's the second question? What's in it for me? Yeah, they definitely want to know what's in it for them, but they want to know who are your customers and if your customers want this, right? They ask you, like, what's your total addressable market? If you could take over the world and all the people that are interested in your problem will look into your product, they want to know what's the total market size, right? Do you have customer validation? How many customers have you talked about it? What's their feedback on it? How many paying customers do you have? So the 2 biggest questions investors want to know is, do customers actually want this? And do you have the team that it takes to make it happen? So we can see that starting with community, which is focused on people, really helps us with our strategy. Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so really how we start is by talking about who. I know Simon Sinek talks about start with why, but I'll talk about why we should start with who as more important. Let's first start with what our community purpose statement is. The way to create this is to talk about who do you need, who do we need, who do I care most deeply about, who do I share interests, identity, or place with, who do I want to help, or if you're an organization, who brings the energy? Who are the people who are already engaged, are contributing, who are attending to you? And assuming that you flourish as a community, who do you want to stick with? And why are we coming together? Now that I understand that who's the group of people that I want to do this with, why should we come together? What's the change that we desire, and what's the problem that only we can solve together? Find someone that's interested in you. I met a surgeon the other day who was talking about how he has a passion for music. So for him, it's like looking into these music communities and see maybe there's someone in that community who's a business major, someone who in this community who's passionate about sales. And so we want to start by talking about who do we need and to do this together and create that community purpose statement. And contrary to Simon Sinek, right? So, and if you guys read his book, Start With Why, he talks very, admirably about this one tech company. And I'm going to share his quote. Hopefully you guys know who it is. It wasn't me who said this. But this one famous quote is like, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits. I'm not going to ask you who said this. But if you even see what this founder said, he started with who? He started, these are the people that I want to support. And why are we supporting these people? Because we want to change the world. So starting with community, how do we do that, right? Just like a startup at different stages, you are focused on different things, and how early stage founders and late stage founders, Series A founders need to change over time. Similarly with the community, you start off with your group of friends or people who are passionate about you as a founder. And then as you grow your community, we can see that at different stages, your focus will need, let me see if I can go back, will change over time. And so if we want to talk about scaling community, a lot of this is also due to the fact, how many of y'all are familiar with Dunbar's number? No, so this is something to look up as well. So Robin Dunbar did a study and realized that we have a physical limitation to how many relationships that we can actually build and maintain regularly. And this is based off our neocortex, which is in charge of like the way that we process and think about complex situations. And he said that the number of relationships that we can actively maintain is actually 150. So if you look at all the relationships, and this isn't like relationships where, oh, I was really good friends with them 10 years ago, and then we talk maybe once a year. It's like people who are actively in your life right now. So these are your families, your friends, your significant others, your partners, your kids, and then people at work. And that number is actually 150. And we look back to old tribes back in Essex or North American tribes, you can see that a lot of these tribes only had 150 people in it. And what was fascinating about these tribes is that whenever these kids or whenever people did something wrong, there was someone in there, whether it could be an old grandma who said, look, you know what you did, you should fix it. They were self-policing communities. They didn't need to have a specific group of people to police the government or police what the community did. Everyone had a deep connection with each other. And so when we talk about scaling communities, it's also understanding that at different stages of community, you need to understand how do we still keep this an intimate conversation. If we look at church organizations, when a small group gets big enough, they split and they multiply. When we look at certain companies, when a team gets big enough, they split and start focusing. The reason why it's important to be understanding like at a certain stage of when your community is growing big enough is because that at a certain point, you're gonna get a lot of noise. So how do we maintain this close relationship as the community starts growing? So similar with the startup cycle, you're focused on your minimum value, your MVP, you're focused on whether customers want it, and then you look at how you can scale this increasingly. So I'm gonna go next. Whoop. Let me see. So how do I know if I'm doing it well, right? It's really important to understand that the metrics can give you an idea of how you're doing, and that these metrics should be tracked regularly and reported regularly, but you have to remember that community is all about quality over quantity. So a simple way to measure quality is really to provide an anonymous survey to your community members and ask them questions about your community purpose without stating it. So what are the types of people that we attract? Why do they say that they want to be here? What do they care about? So if I ask each one of y'all, like, what brought you to Startup Grind? Why are you here? What are the types of people? Does your answer matches what the Startup Grind team is trying to do? And why is it scary for us? Because in the short term, we see this as so time consuming, so much more resources. I'm not a startup that can spend $2,000 with the employees, because what if they quit? What if they choose to take that offer? But if we look at the implications of this, it's like, that whole quote, it's like, it's hard to think about investing in people, and seeing them and seeing if they leave. But what if we don't invest in them and they decide to stay? If we look at your family members and look how you introduce new family members to you, like when your kids start dating someone, what is that process like? Do you just invite them to family reunions for the first week that they dated? No, you have a conversation with them. You spend time and resources. What we're trying to build here is a family. What we're trying to build here is a community of committed individuals. And so we can look at these metrics for different tactical and strategic measures. But as far as ROI, we can see that if you take a community, say you're developing a SaaS product, and you see a lot of these SaaS companies, they have a community that helps them answer any questions, or they build questions about, oh, I'm having issues with this computer, can you help me with it? There's been studies that you can pull within your own company as well. What happens if you shut down the community for 2 days? How many more IT and support tickets are you gonna get, and how much is that gonna cost you, right? So we can talk about how community can help you as a company, and these are all different things and metrics that you can track. So here's some additional resources, some of my favorite books. The Art of Community talks about the 7 principles that the community needs. It talks about the importance of creating boundaries as a place of safety of protecting the members within it. It talks about initiation, how do you get people to cross these boundaries. Talk about the rituals, the things that your team can do to really bring meaning and connection for your employees. The temple, stories, and symbols, and then different conversation on like inner rings and how you can take community leaders within your community to support them as well. I also love the Startup Community Way by Brad Feld. as you guys may or may not know, Brad Feld started TechStars, which is one of the biggest accelerator programs. And so it really talks about how they got started. The Power of Moments is a very powerful book as well. It talks about how we can take events and experiences and make them even bigger. We can take, for example, in the Power of Moments, it talks about how Fitbit would find different milestones, create random milestones to help celebrate the members' growth. You know, if you guys have a sports watch or Fitbit, you might be familiar. At a certain point, they said, oh, you just traveled, 5,000 miles, the same amount of miles that, birds migrate. I don't know if that's actually right, but they would do stuff like that, right? So it's like, how do we create different milestones? If you're a teacher, after teaching your 1,000th kid, how do you celebrate the teacher? And so this really talks about how do you really create moments to help your employees or help the people that you care about to give them something that they'll never forget that may transform their life. And so these are a few books I definitely recommend. There's a free assessment. I also really like this. This is really just to assess where your community is at right now. This is created by the Community Roundtable. I just read that off. And so really how you take this is to understand that there's no right or wrong answer. The goal isn't to be all the way on the right. The goal is to understand where you're currently at, and if your community model matches what your interests, where your startup is at, what your priorities, and what you need to develop your product. And so yeah, that's pretty much it for the conversation on community. To introduce myself, my mission in life is to exist as a collaborating visionary, to enable communities discovery to see what they can do more. And what that really just means for me is that I'm really passionate about working alongside with community leaders to understand how we can support the communities, whether that's through knowledge, whether that's more relationships. I have a strong belief that even if we don't share the same values or same background, we can still work together to do more things, right? So working globally with nonprofits, with kids, with religious organizations, with work, and that's why I love what I do at Dell. I get paid to go travel across the U.S. to support startup communities and figure out how I can give more back to the members. So that's what I'm passionate about, what I do. This is my garage. So I have 7 3D printers in my garage. I have a small e-commerce shop. I pay a kid in the neighborhood to help me to ship that stuff out. This is a picture, a selfie with Warren Buffett that I photobombed because I was too shy to take one with him directly. So I knew if I photobombed it, she was going to post it. And I spend a lot of my time with different startup communities in my free time too. So I love working with Bunker Labs. If you guys have heard of them, they're a 501c3 organization supporting veteran entrepreneurs. But I usually just spend a lot of time with different community leaders in Austin, but also around the world as well. So that's a little bit about me. So thank you very much. I'm more than happy to share what we do for Dell for Startups. But before we get there, does anyone have any questions for that?
Let's give him a round of applause. I can feel that you all want to clap for YJ, so let's do that.
How did I do?
You
have
did
more experience than I
beautiful.
do.
That was great. You're so authentic on stage. Wouldn't you all agree? Very authentic. That realness really translates. It's beautiful. It's good. I approve.
Okay. Thank
10
you.
out of 10, and especially bonus points for getting creative with how you wanted to sit or stand.
Well, I came up earlier, and I asked y'all, and y'all said it was okay. So hopefully, plus the script's right here, so I can just read it. I was like, that's
you don't have to
small.
tell them that.
Oh, I meant my PowerPoint deck was here, so I know what deck I was on.
Yeah, it just made you a little more prepared. My only advice is maybe don't call out the MC for being so much older than you in the first 3 minutes of your speech.
I was calling you wise. I was talking about
I'm taking it in stride. It's okay.
Okay. Community is all about gifts, right? We all have different gifts. We all bring different things on the table. Why I feel so good about myself is because I know what my weakness is. I know that I can rely on you for your experience.
For my vulnerability. Great.
Because
I'm making my mother
anyone,
proud.
right?
It might not be grandkids,
This is
but at least
also
I'm
a
old and
reason why
wise.
you should never start a business by yourself, right? Because everyone brings different things to the table, and like it's so frustrating sometimes. Like whenever I see like kids who like I don't know what I want to do, or I feel like I have to like be good at everything. It's like no, you don't. The whole point of being in the community and being here is because we all bring something to the table. We talk to investors who have money but doesn't have the time to start things that they're passionate about, and so that's why they rely on y'all. So,
Curiosity. Curiosity will get you everywhere. Just ask questions.
yeah.
You don't have to know anything to join a community. I think that's a good point. Are there some more slides? I can stop rambling.
Oh no, that's good. So I'll talk a little bit about Delforce startups as far as like what I get paid to do. So really, we want to talk about Michael Dell. You know, his freshman year back in UT Austin, he realized back I think it was 1980s, before I was born. He realized that during that time, no other company was creating customized solutions, and so through a lot of different like logistical challenge and stuff, he started Dell Technologies, and I think within his first semester, he was making $8,000, and he decided to quit, drop out, and after 4 years, he went public. And so where Dell Technologies is now is that we have all these different companies really here to promote our end-to-end solutions to help support startups with their IT infrastructure. So anything that you guys need help with from a technology perspective, that's how we support y'all. And how we support startups specifically is that we have program managers with entrepreneurial experience. We'll help you with mentors, advisement. We also have a engineering and OEM team. So if you are a startup working on a hardware solution and you need processors, or I was told that a lot of MRI machines actually have Dell systems inside of them. If you look at a lot of these robotics startups, they always need a processor, storage, information. So those are some of the things that our engineering team can help them with as an OEM provider. And of course, financing. We want to keep costs variable until you're at a point where you can spend that, and we help you with the flexibility. We also do free remote data migration. So if you're buying something to help refresh all the old systems, this will at least help you guys save some time with managing all this data forward. What does that journey look like? Well, first, just reach out to us. More than happy to get in touch and understand what your business, what your needs are, technology challenges, and connect you to the right people. At the end of the day, what I love to do is kind of go to VentureBeats, Entrepreneur, to TechCrunch for some of our startup media companies and create stories on how we were able to work together. But the way that we do that is connecting you to one of our startup IT advisors, and they'll do a quick analysis of like what you guys need help with. And it's just a free conversation to have. We're more than happy to just talk to you, and they get paid to be on the phone. I usually spend like 3-4 hours on the phone with people, asking them about their lives, or asking about when they're gonna stop helping their boss to do their own thing. We have the Dell Tech Capital team. I also have one of my friends who's actually here, but they invest $250 million a year, currently have 70 portfolio companies. What their focus is on is enterprise technology solutions. So if you're a startup, pre-seed or Series A, either way, feel free to reach out. I'd love to learn more about your business in any of these fields. They're more than happy to talk to you. One of their biggest unicorns was also, I think, DocuSign. So we're also invested in them. We also have a community platform, global community platform to support women founders and allies. So thank you. Yeah, clap. They're led by a phenomenal group of people. One of my coworkers here is also managing that relationship internally with them. For them, they're really passionate about bringing influencers, subject matter experts. They also do a lot of conversations on legal advice, especially if you want to figure out how to get incorporated. But it's a platform to share your business, to also find more like-minded female founders to help each other out. So you can visit them at dwayne.com. And this is my team. So we recently grew a lot. We recently rebranded. We're calling it Delforce Startups. If you want to reach out, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to email me or email the team at startups@dell.com. And we're just more than happy to be here with y'all. And so that's it.
We have plenty of time for a little bit of Q&A. You don't get to go anywhere yet.
Sure.
Does anybody have a lovely question for YJ? Yes.
So, how how did you end up working for Dell startups, right? And you said you get paid to be able to help other people and build community, and I think that sounds like such an awesome job because I'm a college student and you're in the job market. I have my internship at Twilio, which is really awesome, but overall I do want to help people, and especially in like the business realm.
What did you study?
I study marketing analytics.
Okay. So I think college was hard for me. I think in high school, I loved psychology and I was like, I want to do liberal arts. And then all my friends were like, well, you're going to have to like do masters, blah, blah, blah. And I struggled all the way to college and even after college. And even when I was working at Dell, it's like, I have no idea what I want to do. I love learning everything. I want to know everything. And I think for me, it was like, I was really, like, I wanted to know that I could do anything if I had the option to do so. And that was tough. But what I loved about my university, I went to the University of Houston, and we have the #1 entrepreneurship program in the nation by Princeton Review. You can look it up. And they only took 40 people a year. And what I love about our entrepreneurship program, they literally taught me everything there was about business. Because of our relationship with Melvin Wolf, which is the CEO of Star Furniture, which is a Berkshire Hathaway company, we got to, like 20 of us got to see Warren Buffett every year. And so that's how I got to have a conversation or dinner with them at Omaha. One of the things that they also did was they gave us patents to commercialize because we were in Houston. NASA was also a close relationship. And so we were taking the patents from the university and figure out how to commercialize that. All that to say is that I realized that when it comes to business and startups, it's about your experience more so than your academics, right? You want to do everything you can to build up your resume because I don't care if you're 12 years old, but if you've been practicing surgery for the past 12 years as a kid, I can trust you. Well, hopefully you get a degree, but
wild example there. Wild
okay,
example.
let's do a different example. Coders, right? Let's take coders. If you've been coding since you were 1, like I trust you to build my product for me, right? I think with medical is different. We need to know. You need to do stuff. So that was terrible parable.
It happens.
All that says that college is tough. Because the people who are in the startups community are all ADD, they all want to learn different things, and they're all working together, and you don't really find that tribe or community until you graduate, or until you're actively involved with them outside of it. My advice is, it's funny, if you're working for a company, entrepreneurship isn't going to help you get the job, because they're going to think that you're going to leave them in 2 or 3 years, right, or different. So be very clear what you want to do. How I got the job was honestly luck. Like, I came from an entrepreneurship program. I studied sales because I felt like I sucked at talking to people. And it took me a while to find a job because I was telling people I want to be an entrepreneur. And they're like, well, why should we invest time in you? You know, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're just going to leave us in 2 and 3 years. So, I decided to go to Dell, started a job at sales, doing small business. And it was fun because I got to talk to small business owners. I would literally spend hours on the phone with them. And it was like, why do you just talk to more people instead of the same person over and over? But I enjoyed it. And then I realized a year later is that, hey, Dell Small Business has an opportunity to work with entrepreneurs. Like the idea that we could spend 3 to 4 hours with someone, help them grow, and a year later get $1 million, $3 million in funding, who are they going to think about when they need systems in the future? Hey, this kid spent 3 to 4 hours with me making sure that I had the right things. They made sure that I bought the right computer, that it wasn't over what I needed, it wasn't under what I needed. And so I created a whole SWOT analysis and pitch deck. I told them, hey, this is everyone in the Houston startup community. Here's my relationship with them. This is why this is a good time. So I took my marketing degree and pretty much created them analysis. And it wasn't really part of my job, but I showed my manager and it's like, hey, this is what we need to do to support the startup community. And I don't care if I'm not the person to do it. I just know that Dell, you are in a position to do this. And little did I know there was already people working on this program. And so 11 months in, I got promoted, jumped 2 levels up to work on starting this program. It was called Dell for Entrepreneurs at the time, and that's how I got to be where I am.
That was rad. Cool. All right. We got any? You could. Yes. Let's fucking clap all day. I would just appreciate if we just celebrated everything today. That'd be awesome. Do we have any other questions? I want to make sure I'm looking at the upper deck. I got scolded for missing a few yesterday. This is where you raise your hand and make it look like I missed you yesterday. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Anyone down here? Yeah. Oh, you can be next. You were on it. I saw it.
Yeah.
I mean, I got more tricks than that.
Well, thanks for talking with us. My question's around kind of building the community within the team of a startup. So you kind of mentioned investing in people versus not investing in them and they stay. So when you do build a team and maybe you bring some people in that don't exactly match the culture, you kind of figure it out over time. How do you marry that with trying to invest in them, and when do you kind of know when it's just not going to work out and it's not the team that you're looking to assemble?
Great question. I think that's tough, right? Yesterday, I had a conversation with someone who really talked about, I'm worried about paying someone $2,000 to quit, right? If you what Zappos did, after the first week, after sharing your culture and communities, and talking about, I don't have $2,000 in my cash to do that, as a startup. But if you were to ask them this question, it's like, why are you afraid of paying them $2,000? Do you think they're gonna take it? Then I would evaluate, it's like, do you have a culture problem? Do you have a community problem within your company? If you're so afraid that giving $500 is what's gonna stop them, like if I go to my partner and it's like, hey, I'll pay you $2,000 to break up with me. Do you think they'll take it? If you ask your husband or your wife, will they take it?
Who wants to sign up for that one?
Yeah.
Anyone want to go first there?
Or is it like $5,000, like $10,000? It's like, why are you so afraid of offering that to them? And what it means if they don't take it. You know that they committed to you more than monetary. So like for Tony Hsieh, it's like, how do I create a culture where people would want to come in for free? He still pay them, but how do I create a culture? And those are the type of people that you need in your company. But to your point, it's like, I also need to know that they're competent enough. And so if we imagine a Venn diagram of like, hey, I want people who are genuine, like who are passionate about what I'm trying to do, and we also want people who are competent, there's a good sweet area in which those are the people that we need to hire. And so I think it's more of a hiring question. But if you go back to your employees and kind of look at them, what they're passionate about, what their growth, and you don't know what they're passionate about unless you have an honest, genuine conversation with them. It's like, hey, I know I'm the founder and I have this idea, but I want you to feel this ownership. And that's why as a startup, you're giving equity to them, right? And so this is a conversation you should have with them.
I just want to echo that a little bit. I advise a lot of companies, and certain people are right for certain stages. And that's just a reality, and that's okay. And some people are ground up, bootstrapped to nothing. Some people come in and take over the role of CEO for you after your 7 years or 10 years or whatever to help take you to IPO. And it's okay to remind people that this might not be the phase for them. And you can do that really calm. It doesn't mean you're not great at your job. Your job just might not be the thing that this team needs today or for the next year. And that's totally
part
totally
of being
acceptable.
a CEO is having uncomfortable conversations, right? There's this one book that I really like, The Motive by Patrick Lencioni, and he talks about why people become leaders. Some is for title and fame, some for like the willingness to coach your team. It's a spectrum as well, You're either one or the other. But if you're not having uncomfortable conversations with them, then you're doing yourself and your team a disservice. I think there was also one interesting conversation yesterday where this guy was telling me, hey, YJ, should I be looking to hire people even if I don't have positions? Like, should I be actively recruiting? Well, as a person that works for a corporation, I should always be applying for jobs even if I have a job, because I should know what my market value is. As an employer, you should always be looking and see what talent you have available as well. And who knows, you might find someone that is going to be great for you when you reach a certain stage.
Other piece of advice there, ask people how they want to be thanked. Most people think that incentives, when was the last time somebody asked you how you want to be thanked? It's probably been a long time, right? This is something I end up doing with all my consulting clients, is just understand, because that's motivation, right? It's like Dan Pink, drive. You want to understand what drives someone, period, because the reality is somebody might be feeling incompetent, maybe they're overwhelmed, they don't understand your new tech, they don't know how to ask for that help, they're scared, and they don't know how they'll be rewarded or how they'll know if they're performing well. Because especially with startup culture, it's really intense. We're like terrible at taking champagne moments as a group and patting ourselves on the back. Everyone actually, just pat yourself on the back right now. Fuck it. You're all doing great. Let's just have this moment. I'm proud of each and every one of you. And I see you, and that's lovely. But this is going to be a day.
Oh, I
can
love
just feel it.
I love the how do you like be think. So I think the 5 love languages. There's actually another one called the apology language that I don't know if a lot of people know about. Like how do you like being apologized by, right? Some people are like, oh, hey, I just did something wrong. Can you forgive me? It's like, oh, what are you coming? Like that's like my worst thing. Versus like, hey, I'm sorry I did something wrong. I know how that makes you feel. Like, what can I do to make up for it? Or, hey, I promise I won't do it again. So there's different ways to apologize, like how we like being apologized, so that we know it's genuine. And sometimes it's just a disconnect. Like you truly feel sorry, but they're not receiving it the way that they like it.
That's a really good point. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you brought that up. I know you had a question as well, so I'm going to go to you.
Hi, so I wanted to add to that list of books, The Business of Belonging by David Spinks. Shameless plug, because I work for Bevy, so make sure Derek sees this. But but no, I wanted to recommend that because I wanted to ask, how do you dispel the myth that community building is a free enterprise and not something that's ROI?
It's tough, but it's because people don't know how to measure community. Because like 10 years ago, like all community was is like, oh, how many members are joining? That's all it was. Like how many engaged in communities. But if you look at metrics, like there's this one organization that I looked at called FeverBee, and they literally pulled data as like, if there's this company that was measuring new member conversion, so like taking like what they were doing to invite their programming and how many people who participated in this and joining the community. And they realized like for the first 3 years, the new member conversion was around 11, 12, 14%. But the new member engagement, like how many of these new members were actually engaged in community was 40%, right? But then when they switched strategies, like, hey, how can we convert more members into our community? For the next 3 years, they were like, oh, we're at 40% new member conversion. This looks great. But if we look at the new member engagement, it dropped down to 11%. There's no winning in that, right? It doesn't matter that I'm expanding my family by adding 10 more people if my quality of conversations drop dramatically. And so one of it is like we have to take data, and even with the whole IT support tickets, like how much does it cost to support or like to fix a problem? And how much does it cost for your community to take care of it for you? Right? There are metrics that are available. One, we don't want to get bogged down by them, but there are metrics in which you can measure and evaluate and report on it so that it can give you insights on what your community is doing. But there are tangible ROI to it. It's just harder for a lot of people because they don't spend time. There's no study on this. It takes someone who spent years of experience working on this to kind of visualize and see this.
I think about it like, how do you measure the health of your personal community? You check in. You see how people are doing. You ask questions. It's the same thing for your online community. And the expectations that the metrics need to be exactly the same is a really big fallacy in our industry. That's not what's going to get us forward. It's not going to be it shouldn't depend on how many times you like a Facebook post by a brand to determine your loyalty or your value to them as a lifetime customer. That's bullshit. So the reality is, are you engaged? Is the content relevant? You're paying attention to overall trends. The way that I look at it is, does some piece of content do really well and people loved it more than average? Awesome, let's make some more stuff like that. Is something trailing off? Maybe it's not engaging. We need to ask different questions or do something different. But it isn't that simple. There isn't one metric that determines community health. But I can tell you, if your customers are buying your product, your community is probably fairly happy. And the reason that we saw everyone all of a sudden start caring about community, during the pandemic was they didn't have those touch points that they had to establish community before when they were in person or in the store or doing something. And all of a sudden, they had to figure out how to engage their users online. So it's very cool. Okay, we have time for one more question, if there is one.
Got one here.
Yes. Love it. Big smile, too. I'm here for it.
Hi, thank you for sharing everything. And I took a picture of your slide that says, mentions about the difference between the strategy of like team-led growth and community-led growth. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to talk about like the difference. Team-led growth focus on product, strategy, and service. And here you say that community-led growth focus on purpose. And I really want to know like how to touch in purpose and build a community with purpose and this difference.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to the community purpose statement. It's like, it starts with who you want to be with and help out with, right? And then once you realize like, hey, these are the group of people that I'm trying to solve the problem for. So you're creating like a travel application app, right? You probably want developers who know about traveling and care about traveling. So we start with who we want, and then we talk about why we are together and why are we solving this problem. And then we can go into what and how and all those other questions. But I guess in that question, it's really more about now that you have the people in the room that you're trying to help and solve, like we just want to focus on how can we build relationships so we can bounce ideas off each other so we can reiterate. Hopefully that answers the question, but.
Yeah, and also like in a corporation, for example, how to touch in like purpose and what do you mean by purpose in that sense? Like purpose in life or like having a goal?
Yeah, it's like what is the purpose of our organization? I'm creating a travel app because I want to like help people who plan travel manage it better besides using Excel sheets, right? Like if we look at nonprofit organizations that people are willing to work there for free, like what is that sense of purpose that's inherent to us as a human? Like you have these charities that's like, oh, I want to build like more wells in developing countries. Like why are people willing to work for it? In fact, pay to work for them, right? So we can see that these are very purpose-driven communities and that people feel so aligned with the mission that they're willing to pay to be a part of it. And so we look at our own business, it's like, am I able to get an employee to pay to be one of me, right? If we look at some of the biggest brands, like there's some certain corporations that are, man, I would love to work there even if it's for free. And then you have to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? It's because I am so aligned with their values and their mission. And so if you talk about like when you're trying to like look at your own company and figure out like, hey, how can I get people to want to work for me for free? You think about like, what am I doing wrong? What should I be focused on? How can I create that purpose that's inherent to all of us? And the way to do that is start with the people that you want to support and what they care about.
Love that. Great note to close on. Everyone, please give it up for YJ Lin. YJ, thank you so much.